The Arizona sun hammered down on Interstate 10 like a blacksmith's anvil, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late July, and the thermometer had already kissed 112 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside her 2008 Honda Civic, Sarah Mitchell gripped the steering wheel with both hands, her knuckles white, her jaw clenched. The dashboard warning lights had been flickering for the past 15 miles, first the check engine light, then the temperature gauge creeping into the red zone. She'd been ignoring them, praying they'd hold out just long enough to get her to Phoenix. Just another 20 miles, that's all she needed. "Come on, baby," she whispered to the car, her voice hoarse from dehydration. Just a little further. Sarah was 34 years old, though the stress of the past 2 years had carved lines around her eyes that made her look older. Her brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her hospital scrubs, stained from a 12-hour shift at the nursing home in Tucson, clung to her skin with sweat. She hadn't slept more than 5 hours in 3 days. The overtime was killing her, but the bills didn't care about exhaustion. Her son, Tyler, was waiting for her at her sister's house in Phoenix. He was 9 years old, gap-toothed, obsessed with dinosaurs, and the only thing in her life that made sense anymore. Since her husband's death in a construction accident 18 months ago, everything had become a blur of survival. Working double shifts, dodging creditors, keeping Tyler fed and in school. The car shuddered. "No, no, no!" A plume of white steam erupted from under the hood. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. Sarah's heart sank as the Civic rolled to a stop on the narrow shoulder of the highway, barely 3 feet from the edge where the desert scrub began. She sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, staring at the endless ribbon of road ahead. Heat waves danced across the pavement. Not a single tree in sight. No shade, no help. Her phone showed 1 bar of service and 8% battery. She dialed 411 for roadside assistance. "We're experiencing high call volume," the automated voice chirped. "Your estimated wait time is 45 minutes. 45 minutes. In this heat." Sarah felt the panic rising in her chest, that familiar tightness that had become her constant companion since Danny died. She forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Tyler needed her. She couldn't fall apart. She popped the hood and stepped out into the furnace. The heat hit her like a physical blow. Within seconds, sweat poured down her face. The metal hood was too hot to touch, so she used the sleeve of her scrub top to lift it. Steam billowed out. The radiator had given up entirely. Coolant pooled on the ground beneath the car, hissing as it hit the scorching asphalt. "Great," she muttered. "Just perfect." She looked up and down the highway. A few cars whizzed past, their drivers encased in air-conditioned comfort, oblivious to her plight. The shoulder was barely wide enough for her car. If she stood too close to the road, she'd be inches from trucks barreling past at 75 miles per hour. Sarah pulled out her phone again and called her sister. "Jen, it's me. My car died on I-10. I don't know what to do." "What? Where are you exactly?" "Maybe 20 miles outside Phoenix, near the Hassayampa exit." "Jesus, Sarah. It's 112 degrees out there. Get back in the car. Turn on the AC. The engine's dead." "There is no AC." Silence on the other end. Then, Okay, I'm calling AAA right now. Stay in the shade if you can find any. Drink water. I'll be there as soon as..." The call dropped. Sarah looked at her phone. No service now. Battery at 6%. She wanted to scream. Instead, she laughed, a short, bitter sound that got swallowed by the desert wind. The world tilted slightly. Sarah blinked, realizing she hadn't eaten since 6 a.m. A granola bar and black coffee, 14 hours ago. She'd been too busy at work, too rushed to even sit down. Now her blood sugar was crashing, her body dehydrated, her brain cooking in the Arizona sun. She leaned against the car, but the metal burned through her scrubs. She stumbled toward the front, seeking the small shadow cast by the open hood. It wasn't much, but it was something. That's when she heard it. A low rumble in the distance, growing louder. Sarah turned and saw them coming from the east. A formation of motorcycles, at least 20 of them, riding 2 abreast. Even from a quarter-mile away, she could see the leather vests, the gleaming chrome, the unmistakable skull and wings patch. Hell's Angels. Her first instinct was fear. She'd seen the news stories, heard the rumors. Outlaw bikers, criminals, violence. Her hand instinctively moved to her car door, ready to lock herself inside if they stopped. But they wouldn't stop. Why would they? She was just another broken-down car on a desert highway. The rumble grew deafening. The lead bikes were close now, close enough that she could see the riders' faces behind their sunglasses, the tattoos covering their arms, the stern expressions that seemed carved from stone. Sarah's vision swam. The heat pressed down on her skull like a vice. She tried to step back toward her car, but her legs wouldn't respond correctly. The pavement rushed up to meet her. She collapsed. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was the flash of chrome and the shadow of leather-clad giants descending around her like dark angels from a burning sky. Marcus Ghost Sullivan saw her go down. He was riding point, leading the Phoenix chapter on their weekly run to Tucson and back, a tradition as old as the chapter itself. Ghost was 52, 6'3", with a grey beard down to his chest and eyes that had seen more than most men could handle. He'd been a Hell's Angel for 31 years. He'd buried brothers, served time, and learned the hard way that the world didn't give a damn about anyone, but he'd also learned that sometimes you had to. The woman hit the pavement hard. No attempt to catch herself, just a dead weight collapse. 1 second she was standing by her steaming car. The next, she was face down on the asphalt. Ghost's hand shot up in the air, the signal to stop. 23 bikes behind him killed their engines in sequence, a choreographed silence that felt almost sacred after the thunder of Harley-Davidson Fide twins. "What have we got?" asked Rake, Ghost's VP, pulling up beside him. "Woman down. Heat stroke, looks like." They dismounted in unison, boots hitting pavement. Ghost moved fast for a big man, crossing the 20 feet to Sarah in seconds. He knelt beside her, one knee on the scorching asphalt, and gently turned her onto her side. Recovery position, something he'd learned in his army days before the club. Her pulse was racing, thready, skin dry and hot to the touch. Classic heat exhaustion, maybe worse. "Somebody call 911, Ghost barked. Tiny, a massive biker with hands like catcher's mitts, already had his phone out. "On it, Ghost. Crank, get the water cooler from your saddlebag. Diesel, I need shade over here. Now." The brothers moved with military precision. Within 30 seconds, Crank appeared with a jug of ice water. Diesel and 2 others unfurled a tarp, rigging it between bikes to create a makeshift shelter from the sun. Ghost carefully lifted Sarah, she probably weighed 130 pounds soaked, and moved her into the shade. More brothers positioned their bikes across both lanes, blocking traffic. Horns blared. A few civilian drivers shouted obscenities. Nobody cared. Let them honk. This woman needed help. Ghost poured water onto his bandana and pressed it against Sarah's forehead, her neck, her wrists, cooling the pulse points. Her eyelids fluttered. "That's it," he said quietly. "Come on back." An Arizona highway patrol car appeared, lights flashing. Officer Jennifer Parsons stepped out, hand instinctively moving to her sidearm when she saw the Hell's Angels patches. She'd been briefed about the club. They weren't technically criminals, but they weren't exactly Boy Scouts either. "What's going on here?" she demanded, projecting authority she wasn't entirely sure she felt. Ghost looked up, his expression flat. "Woman collapsed. Heat stroke. Ambulance is coming." Parsons approached cautiously, saw Sarah lying in the shade, saw the bikers maintaining a perimeter of protection around her. It wasn't what she'd expected. "You know her?" "Never seen her before in my life." "Then why?" "Because she needed help," Ghost said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Sarah's eyes opened. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The faces above her were strangers, hard-looking men with tattoos and leather, a woman in a police uniform. Panic spiked through her chest. "Easy," Ghost said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You passed out. You're okay. Help's coming." My son," Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Where's your son?" "Phoenix, I was going to..." "Breathe. Just breathe. You're going to be fine." The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later. Sierra Vista Fire Department paramedics, who knew Ghost and his brothers from various charity runs and community events. They loaded Sarah onto a stretcher, started an IV, checked her vitals. "Moderate heat exhaustion," the lead paramedic, Rodriguez, confirmed. "You guys probably saved her life." "Another 20 minutes in this, son." He didn't need to finish the sentence. As they loaded Sarah into the ambulance, Ghost walked back to his bike and did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He unzipped his leather vest, his cut in club parlance, the sacred garment that bore his patches, his rank, his identity as a Hell's Angel. He removed it carefully, folding it with reverence. Rake's eyes widened. "Ghost, what the hell are you—" "She's got a kid," Ghost said quietly. "If something happens to her, I want him to know his mom didn't die alone on a highway. I want him to know somebody gave a damn." He walked back to the ambulance and handed the vest to Rodriguez. "If she doesn't make it," Ghost said, his voice carrying the weight of decades, "give this to her son. Tell him his mother rode with angels today." Rodriguez took the vest like it was made of glass. He nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was holding. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing. Officer Parsons stood beside her patrol car, watching the bikers remount and restart their engines. She'd been prepared for trouble, gang activity, intimidation, maybe worse. Instead, she'd witnessed something that would make her question every assumption she'd ever had about the men in those leather vests. Ghost threw a leg over his Harley and looked at her. For just a moment, their eyes met. She saw something there: pain, loss, a fierce loyalty to a code most people wouldn't understand. Then he kick-started the engine. The thunder rolled across the desert, and the Hells Angels convoy disappeared down I-10 like smoke in the wind. Back at the Phoenix Police Department Dispatch Center, Parsons filed her report. When she described what she'd witnessed, her supervisor stopped her. "Wait, back up. The Hells Angels did what?" "They stopped. They helped her. They called 911. They probably saved her life." The supervisor leaned back in his chair, speechless. Within hours, the story had spread through the entire department. Cops who'd spent years assuming the worst about the motorcycle club suddenly had to reconcile those assumptions with what had actually happened on that desert highway. At Phoenix Memorial Hospital, Sarah Mitchell was regaining consciousness in the ER. She was hooked to monitors, IV fluids replenishing what the desert had stolen, her body slowly coming back from the edge. A nurse leaned over her. "How are you feeling, hun?" "Tired." Where's my son?" "Your sister's on the way. She'll be here soon." The nurse paused. "You had a lot of people worried about you, especially those bikers." "Bikers?" "The Hells Angels. They're the ones who found you, kept you alive until the ambulance came." Sarah's memory was foggy, but fragments were coming back. The rumble of engines, the wall of leather-clad men, strong hands lifting her, a gruff voice telling her to breathe. Is there a way to thank them?" The nurse smiled. "Honey, just getting better is thanks enough." But in her mind, Sarah knew that wasn't true. Those men, strangers who owed her nothing, had stopped their ride, risked their own safety in traffic, and protected her when she was at her most vulnerable. She'd spent her whole life believing certain things about certain people. In one desperate moment on a desert highway, everything she thought she knew had been proven wrong, and somehow that changed everything. Sarah spent 2 nights in the hospital. The doctors called it severe heat exhaustion, complicated by dehydration, malnutrition, and extreme stress. They used words like dangerous and lucky to be alive, and another 15 minutes. She didn't remember much of the first night. Fever dreams, the taste of bile, Tyler's face floating in and out of focus. Her sister Jen stayed by her bedside, holding her hand, whispering that everything would be okay, even though they both knew their definition of okay had been shattered long ago. By the second day, Sarah was sitting up, eating bland hospital food, and trying to figure out how she was going to pay for all of this. No insurance. The nursing home where she worked offered coverage, but she'd been putting off the enrollment because it meant less money in her paycheck. Money she needed for rent, for Tyler's school supplies, for the mountain of debt Danny had left behind. Jen sat in the visitor's chair, exhausted but relieved. "They're discharging you tomorrow morning. I talked to the billing department about a payment plan." "How bad?" "We'll figure it out." Which meant bad. Sarah closed her eyes. "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry for—" "Stop," Jen said firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for. None of this is your fault." But it felt like it was. Everything felt like it was her fault. The broken car, the collapsed body, the scared 9-year-old boy who'd been shuffled from relative to relative while his mother fought to survive. What kind of mother was she? What kind of person collapses on a highway because she's too proud, too stubborn, too broke to ask for help? There was a knock on the door. A hospital administrator entered, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Karen Reeves from Patient Services. I wanted to let you know that your medical bills have been taken care of." Sarah blinked. "What?" "Paid in full." The gentleman who settled your account said you'd saved his life once and he was just returning the favor. I don't understand. I don't know anyone who... He didn't leave a name. Just paid cash at the front desk and left. After Karen departed, Sarah and Jen stared at each other in confusion. Neither of them knew anyone with that kind of money to spare. Then Sarah remembered. The bikers. Jen, can you find out if the police have any information about the men who helped me? The Hells Angels. It took 2 days and Officer Jennifer Parsons' personal intervention, but eventually Sarah got what she needed. The Hells Angels Phoenix chapter met regularly at a place called the Iron Horse, a bar on the outskirts of the city. Parsons was hesitant to give out the information. She didn't want Sarah walking into a biker bar unprepared, but something in the woman's eyes convinced her. Just be careful, Parsons warned. They're not dangerous, but they're not ordinary people either. They live by their own code. The following Saturday, Sarah borrowed Jen's car and drove to the Iron Horse. It was a low-slung building with a gravel parking lot full of motorcycles, Harleys, Indians, a few choppers that looked like they'd been built from scratch. The sign above the door was hand-painted, a rearing horse made of iron chains. Sarah's hands trembled as she pushed open the door. The interior was dim, smelling of beer and leather and decades of cigarette smoke that had seeped into the wood. A jukebox in the corner played Johnny Cash. About 15 bikers were scattered around the bar, shooting pool, playing cards, talking in low voices. Every single one of them turned to look at her. The silence was profound. Sarah suddenly felt very small, very out of place in her Target jeans and cardigan, but she'd come this far. She wasn't backing down now. "I'm looking for Marcus Sullivan," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Ghost." A woman behind the bar, 50-something, with short grey hair and arms covered in roses and skulls, pointed toward the back. Corner booth. Ghost sat alone, reading a newspaper with reading glasses perched on his nose. An oddly domestic image for a man who looked like he'd walked out of a western. He glanced up as Sarah approached. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You're alive. Thanks to you. Have a seat." Sarah slid into the booth across from him. Up close, she could see the scars on his knuckles, the tattoo on his neck that read FTW, Freedom Through Wind, or so she'd learned from a hasty Google search. But she also saw laugh lines around his eyes and something in his expression that wasn't hard or cruel, just watchful. "I came to say thank you," Sarah began, "and to ask why." "Why what?" "Why you stopped. Why you helped me." "You don't know me." Ghost folded his newspaper carefully. "You ever been in the service?" "No. I was Army. Infantry. Learned something over there. You don't leave people behind. Doesn't matter if they're your battle buddy or a complete stranger. You see someone down, you help, simple as that. Most people wouldn't have stopped. Most people aren't us." Sarah hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "Someone paid my hospital bills." "Was it you?" Ghost's expression didn't change. "Does it matter?" "It was over $8,000. "Lady, I don't know what you're—" "Please." Sarah's voice cracked. "Please just let me thank you. I don't have much, but I need to do something. Anything." Ghost was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You got a kid, right? You mentioned a son. Tyler. He's 9. You working?" "2 jobs. Nursing home in Tucson, and I just picked up weekend shifts at a diner in Phoenix. I'm trying to move here full-time, be closer to my sister, give Tyler some stability." Ghost saw it then. The exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she carried, the desperate scramble to hold everything together with nothing but willpower and love. He'd seen that look before, in his own mother's eyes decades ago, after his father had drunk himself to death and left her with 3 boys to raise on a waitress's salary. "You need a car," he said. "I can't afford—" "Didn't ask if you could afford it. I said you need a car." Ghost pulled out his phone and made a call. "Wrench, it's me. That '09 Toyota Camry we got at the auction last month. The silver one. Yeah, I need it ready by Monday. Full service, new tires, the works. Because I said so, that's why." He hung up. "We run a garage, restore bikes, fix cars. Sometimes we get vehicles donated or bought cheap at auction. Camry's got 140,000 miles on it, but it runs solid. It's yours." Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. "I can't accept—" "Yes, you can. Your boy needs his mother alive, not dead on a highway, because her junker broke down in the desert. You want to thank me? Take the car. Get to your job safely. Raise your kid. That's thanks enough." The words hit Sarah like a physical force. She'd been so used to fighting alone, to being told she was on her own, that this simple act of kindness from a stranger felt almost impossible to process. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Ghost looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "My mum raised me and my brothers alone. Worked 3 jobs. Never asked for help. One winter she got pneumonia. Didn't go to the doctor because she couldn't afford it. Ended up in the hospital anyway, nearly died. I was 17, scared shitless, didn't know how we'd pay for it." He paused, his jaw working. "Some guys from a local union, strangers, men my mom had never met. They took up a collection, paid her bills, made sure we had food on the table. They saved us. And you never forgot. Never forgot. So when I see a woman busting her ass to take care of her kid, breaking herself into pieces to make ends meet, yeah, I help. Because somebody helped us when we needed it. That's the code." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of yourself. Say you'll eat regular meals and sleep more than 5 hours. Say you'll let people help you when you need it instead of running yourself into the ground. I'll try. That's all anyone can do." Over the next hour, Sarah met more of the brothers. Rake, who ran a construction crew and offered her odd weekend jobs doing office work. Tiny, who had a daughter Tyler's age, and invited them both to a barbecue next month. Diesel, who turned out to be a former nurse and gave her tips on dealing with burnout. These men who she'd been taught to fear, who society had labeled as outlaws and criminals, treated her with more respect and kindness than most of the so-called respectable people in her life. By the time Sarah left the Iron Horse that evening, she had a car promised to her, 3 job leads, an invitation to a community barbecue, and something she hadn't felt in 18 months. Hope. 3 months later, Sarah pulled up to Tyler's school in the silver Camry, clean, reliable, with a full tank of gas she'd paid for with her own paycheck. She'd taken the weekend job at the construction office Rake had set up, and between that and her nursing home salary, she'd finally stopped drowning. Not swimming yet, maybe, but no longer going under. Tyler bounded out of the building, his dinosaur backpack bouncing, his gap-toothed grin lighting up the Arizona afternoon. "Mom! Guess what? Mr. Peterson said my volcano project was the best in class." "That's amazing, buddy. Get in, I have a surprise for you." As they drove toward Phoenix, Tyler chatted about school, about his friends, about the new book he was reading. Sarah listened, really listened. Not with half her brain calculating bills and worrying about the future, just listening to her son, present in the moment. They pulled up to the Iron Horse. Tyler's eyes widened. "Whoa, are those real motorcycles?" "Very real. Come on, I want you to meet some friends." The annual Phoenix chapter charity barbecue was in full swing. Dozens of bikers and their families filled the parking lot. Kids running around, music playing, the smell of burgers on the grill. It was chaotic and loud and somehow perfect. Ghost spotted them and walked over, wiping his hands on his apron. "You must be Tyler." Tyler looked up at the massive, bearded man, and his eyes went wide. "Are you a Hell's Angel?" "I am." "That's so cool," Ghost laughed, a deep, genuine sound. "Your mom's pretty cool herself. She tell you what happened?" "She said her car broke and you guys helped her." "That's right. And you know what? She's one tough lady. You should be proud of her." Tyler looked at his mother with new eyes. "I am." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She'd spent so long feeling like a failure, like she was barely keeping it together, that hearing those words from her son, from this man who'd become an unlikely friend, nearly broke her. The afternoon unfolded like a dream. Tyler played with other kids, his laughter ringing across the parking lot. Sarah sat with some of the brothers' wives and girlfriends, women who welcomed her without judgment, who understood hard times and harder choices. They swapped stories, shared advice, and by the end of it Sarah had 3 new friends and a standing invitation to girls' night. As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of amber and crimson, Ghost called everyone together. "All right, listen up," he shouted. "Tradition time!" The bikers assembled their motorcycles in a long line. Tyler's eyes went wide as Ghost approached with his helmet. "Ever been on a Harley, kid?" Tyler looked at Sarah, practically vibrating with excitement. She hesitated. The old Sarah, the cautious Sarah, would have said no. Too dangerous, too risky. But she was learning to trust, learning to let go. "Is it safe?" she asked. "Safest ride of his life, I promise." Sarah nodded. "Okay." Ghost lifted Tyler onto the back of his bike, secured the helmet, and gave him instructions on where to hold on. The boy looked like he'd just been handed the keys to a rocket ship. "You ready?" Ghost asked. "Yeah." The convoy started their engines, a thunder that rolled across the desert, magnificent and primal. They pulled out onto the empty access road, riding slowly in formation with Tyler whooping with joy on the back of Ghost's bike. Sarah stood with the others, watching her son experience something he'd remember for the rest of his life. Jen appeared beside her, having driven in for the barbecue. "You okay?" Jen asked. Sarah wiped her eyes. "Better than okay. You've changed, in a good way. I had to. I was so busy being strong, being independent, proving I didn't need anyone. I almost killed myself. These people taught me something important." "What's that?" "That asking for help isn't weakness. That accepting kindness doesn't make you a burden. That sometimes the people the world tells you to fear are the ones who'll save your life." The bikes returned, engines rumbling to a stop. Tyler jumped off, practically levitating with excitement. "Mom, did you see me? I was on a motorcycle. It was amazing." Sarah knelt down and hugged him tight. "I saw, baby. You were so brave." Ghost walked over and handed her something, his leather vest, the one he'd given to the paramedics that day on the highway. Sarah had tried to return it weeks ago, but he'd refused. "I want you to keep this," Ghost said. "Not because you're a member, you're not, and you don't need to be, but because you're family now. You and Tyler, both. That's what this means." Sarah looked at the vest, at the patches and pins, at the worn leather that had been worn in 1,000 desert rides. It wasn't just a jacket. It was a symbol of belonging, of protection, of a code that meant something. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For seeing me when I was invisible, for helping when I couldn't help myself, for giving me hope when I had none left." Ghost's expression softened. "That's what brothers do, and sisters. We take care of our own." As the evening deepened and the stars emerged over the Arizona desert, Sarah sat with Tyler on a picnic bench, watching the Hells Angels and their families laughing around the fire. She thought about the day she'd collapsed on that highway, certain her life was falling apart, certain she was alone. She'd been wrong about so much, about bikers, about strength, about what it meant to survive. She'd learned that sometimes the angels come dressed in leather, riding steel horses, carrying the weight of their own scars, and choosing to help anyway. 3 months ago, she'd been a woman dying alone on a desert highway. Now she was a woman surrounded by family. Unconventional, maybe, but real. And for the first time since Danny died, Sarah Mitchell looked toward the future and felt something she thought she'd lost forever: joy.